Welcome to Bringing It to Life Mastering. As I mentioned in the chat window, I'm recording this session, so if anything kind of feels weird over the stream, I think I've managed to get it to stream in stereo, but yeah, if anything goes weird, it's all being recorded, and so you'll be able to hopefully pick up what you missed from that. I've got the chat window open, so if you have any questions throughout, by all means, ask away and I'll do my best to answer those. I will break for questions a couple of times throughout the webinar, so you're welcome to wait until those moments as well. So this is what we're talking about today. We're going to bring it to life mastering. So just really quickly, if you haven't been on one of these sessions before, this is the fourth of four. So in the first session, we wrote a script, and, kind of worked on getting the creativity right and making sure that we were connecting in the right way and coming up with an interesting idea. Then in the second webinar, we looked at just editing it together and sketching out what it might look like. The third webinar, the last webinar that we did, was all about processing and how we could bring it together and make it sound a bit more polished. Then in this session today, we're going to just glue the thing together. Really, I say bring it to life. We're going to just enhance what we've created. We don't want to drastically change it. We just want to make it stand up against the music that might play on this fictional radio station's playlist. Very quickly about myself, if you weren't on one of these calls before, my name is Chris, as you would have gathered, and I have nearly 20 years of experience in radio imaging, from my time in New Zealand working at CHR on a rock station there, which then ultimately brought me to the UK, United Kingdom, England, to run and create the sound of Capital FM and launch the network, and to launch an urban station called Capital Extra. Did that for 5 or 6 years, and then spent some time working at a couple of phenomenal production companies. And now I'm here doing my own thing, and I partnered with Megatrax, who are helping to bring my message to the world, shall we say. So today's session, let's get on with it. Bringing it to life, mastering. What's the goal here? So we want to explore like how we can enhance and finesse a final mix through mastering, identifying ways to make work sound consistent and stand up against the music your station plays, which I sort of alluded to before. So I think there are sort of 4 key points that we need to think about. Why and how was it useful? What should we consider, and what are the ways to approach it? What techniques can we employ, and also things to watch out for. Something I will say is mastering can mean lots of different things to different people. And I just like to preface today's webinar with, this is my approach to it. I'm a big fan of having quite a busy, shall we say, mastering chain. I like to use a lot of plugins. But I know that there are people that prefer to use minimal plugins and not do too much to get their sound right. And there's no wrong or right way about this. Whatever gets you to the result that you feel works best, that's what you really want to be doing. So please take what you see today as inspiration rather than a guideline. So let's switch to the DAW. So I use Pro Tools, nothing wrong with any of the other ones. This is just the one I use. I think I mentioned that in the last session. So just as a quick reminder, I thought I'll play the promo. What I've done is I've set up a clean session here. You'll see quite a few master channels, but ignore those for the minute. Let's just look at this bottom track here. And that bottom track is the audio from the promo that we made. I just bounced it out. There's nothing on the master in that session. It's just what we created when we did the mix and the processing on the voices and things. So let's have a quick listen to that, and then we can start to talk about how and why we might want to use some mastering on this particular piece.
Coronavirus. Masks. Social distancing. They ruin live gigs.
Make some noise.
What? What'd you say?
So instead of going, we'll bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you hear a live track. Be caller 9 and you'll win $500 cash to help you through lockdown.
Oh, when I win, I could buy so many more masks.
Start Saturday morning at 6 on WIZZFX.
Cool. So it feels nice. There's nothing wrong with the mix on that, but you know, I think we can probably enhance this a little bit. We can maybe just round it out a little bit, make it a bit warmer, and just kind of glue the thing together. There's a lot of, you know, something we talked about a lot when we were creating this mix is there are a lot of different sources of material, from acapellas to, you know, we've got crowd samples, we've got sound design, we've got the wonderful Lisa Keys, her voice, we've got, sorry, excuse me, we've got really terrible character voices from myself in there. You know, there's a lot of different sourced material because Lisa and I recorded on different microphones, different settings, you know. So although we've done our best when we've mixed it, we could probably do with just further gluing and bringing this all into the same space. So that's something that, that I feel this piece will really benefit from. Looking at the waveform, I mean, you should always use your ears first, but we work in an age where we can also see sound. So we can look at the waveform and we can identify either problems or things we like. Now, I don't actually see a lot of problems in this mix. There may be a couple of rather large spikes here. There's this one here. There are a couple of other little impact points that appear to be kind of sticking out that I'm highlighting here. But by and large, the sort of average feel of it, it looks pretty decent. So there's not any sort of glaring big issue there for me. And as I said before, listening to it, to me, it felt like it needs to be a little warmer. It could be a little bit more forward and a little bit, have a little bit of extra punch and excitement. So those are some of the things that I might like to add to this particular piece. So that's kind of some things I might like to do. Why? Because as we mentioned before, if this is playing on a radio station, you know, playing similar music to what we've included in the promo, we want it to stand up against that music. And there are lots of arguments for, oh, you shouldn't master things too much because they hit, the optimod or the processing chain of the radio station. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that sort of thought and working in that manner, but the music you're playing hasn't been mixed to consider the specific settings of your radio station. The music is just mixed to sound really good, irrespective of where it's played. That's the kind of goal of mixing music. So my sort of goal, therefore, is to mix my promos and master my promos so that they have a similar feel. They'll sound good on any system, whether it's running through the radio optimod or not. That's my theory, and that's kind of how I guess rationalize in my brain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And that's also how it's useful, because thinking about it as the music that might play on this radio station is mastered and runs through the optimod, so therefore I must master my promo or my sweepers or any of my imaging to compete with that music. That's also the how. That's how it's going to stand out. That's how it's useful, because we want this to stand out. We want people to hear it and understand it. So we've sort of talked about the why and the how and the things to consider. Really, I sort of jumped the gun and mentioned that first, but just to very quickly recap, looking at the waveform and also listening to it just before, needs some extra warmth and excitement, kind of bring it a little bit more into our, to hit our faces a little bit more. And I want to just deal with some of those random transients at the same time that are sort of poking through. Not there's anything wrong with having a moment of an impact, but I can certainly address them because they're a little bit louder than the rest of the promo. If I address those moments, I can increase the average level of the promo and make it louder, which will help it stand out. So with that in mind, I went and created sort of 5 master chains, I suppose, sort of working from top to bottom. One being the one that I most likely would employ in this situation. And then I've sort of tried to go with 2, 3, and 4 are kind of some alternate options. And then 5 is something I would never do because it doesn't sound great. So what I want to do is we're going to get to the one that I don't think sounds great last. I think it'd be interesting to work through some of the nice sounding master chains. So let me enable this particular chain, and I'll play it back for you, and then we can sort of break down what's going on.
Masks. Social distancing. They ruin live gigs.
Make some noise. What? What'd you say?
So instead of going, we'll bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you hear a live track. Be caller 9 and you'll win $500 cash to help you through lockdown.
Oh, and I could buy so many more masks.
Start Saturday morning at 6 on WIZZFX.
So instantly, I made a rookie mistake. Earlier, I boosted the volume so that we could all hear that a bit better. Now it sounds completely overmastered. So let me have a run at that again. I've just pulled the volume back down. I'll play that one more time, and it won't sound quite so slammed.
Coronavirus. Masks. Social distancing. They ruin live gigs.
Make some noise. What? What'd you say?
So instead of going, we'll bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you hear a live track. Be caller 9 and you'll win $500 cash to help you through lockdown.
Oh, and I could buy so many more masks.
Start Saturday morning at 6 on WIZZFX.
So that sounds a little nicer than when I had a boosted 6 dB going into it. What I like about this particular chain, and we might tweak it a little bit, maybe it's a little bit too much, there's a bit too much weight to it to my ears, but what I like about this is it's really balanced the volume between the muffled characters and muffled singing and the voiceover. So everything just feels a little bit more intelligible, even though we've had to kind of mess around with making people feel or sound like they've been talking from behind a mask. So let's quickly break this one down. So we're looking at Master 1. So the first thing I've done is I've taken off the very extreme lows and the very extreme tops that no one's going to hear. I'm going to try and play this again so you can see very quickly just what's going on.
Coronavirus.
It's really subtle, but we don't need this extreme sub 20K bass, and anything over sort of 20 odd thousand hertz I think a lot of us won't hear. So just cutting that out, and I've made a couple of dips here just because I felt like they were a little forward. Especially Lisa has a tendency to have quite strong S's, and although we did a lot of work on that in the mix, it just feels like it's poking through in the when we're getting to the mastering stage. So just look, we're not even talking a dB, just a little notch there, just a little hump out, just to kind of give me some space for that. The next thing I've done then is I've run that into a compressor. Now, my theory here is from the EQ into the compressor is I'm getting rid of unwanted frequencies that I don't want to be compressed. I don't want to squash them anymore. And then I'm using the compressor as a very light, very, very light glue. You won't see this bounce very much. I've got it set to 2 to 1. I'm using the auto setting on the release. I've backed the attack off to let some of the impacts and transients still carry through, so we still get some of the punch. I've boosted the volume a little bit, but this isn't working particularly hard.
Coronavirus.
So, not much. And if I just skip forward to some of these transients.
Bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you...
So again, you don't see them pop very much. It's letting those transients through, so the needle doesn't move a lot, which is exactly what I want. Why have I picked this particular compressor? If you're into nerding out about compressors and stuff, you'll know that the SSL compressor is kind of renowned for punch. So that's kind of why I've used it, because I want to add some punch to this piece. So that's why I've picked it. Next thing I've done is I've gone into a multi-band compressor. These things are really complicated and take a while. They're wieldy beasts is what I'm trying to say. So it can take a while for you to get your head around it, but just go with some really light settings as I have here. Excuse me. Although I've got a high ratio, very, very slow attack and release, very slow. And this is just now trying to smoothen things out a bit. We've kind of got some punch. This is now just trying to add some of that smoothness.
Bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you hear a live track. Be caller 9 and you'll win $500 cash.
So you can see I was tweaking the settings a bit there, but don't be fooled. That's -6, that's -12. So that the difference between these numbers is not particularly to scale. So anything under that -6 is fine, which is where I was trying to keep it. And notice not every frequency was going all the time. And that's fine as well. Again, this is just smoothing out and balancing the frequencies, just giving things a little bit more polish and evening out the mix. Then I've decided that I want this to be brighter. This is a stupidly hilarious plugin because it lets you go all the way up to 40K, which we can't hear. But for some reason, using this airband and slapping in 4 dB of air gain, as I have here, just made it feel a little brighter and a little more forward. So that's what I've done there, and a touch of a notch here at 160 and 650. Just, I guess, as I was playing it back, I felt like I needed to pull those out. Very quickly, actually, let me play you a before and after of that.
Bring them to you. Coronavirus. Masks. Social distance.
It may not come through on the Zoom stream, but really you just feel this very subtle lift right at the top, which is quite nice because it's not boosting the sibilance. It's just, from Lisa's voice, but it's just adding a little bit of sizzle. Yes, we cut out a lot of that here. Absolutely understand. But this air gain just does something magical to anything above here. So it just, I don't know, there's just something about it that I really like that sort of enhances and adds a sizzle. The next thing I've done is I've used something to kind of give it some analog warmth. And I on my socials, if you follow me, I quite often talk about using things like this to kind of just give it a little bit of flavor and taste. The reason I've done this, I've set this up to kind of crunch the mid-range. I'm not boosting. See, this is this high frequency trim. I'm doing no boosting. In fact, it's a very slight cut. This crosstalk, think of that as a bass knob. I'm adding a little bit of bass, but I'm just trying to, this amount and tape type is really controlling the mid-range. So I'm just crunching up the mid-range a bit and trying to help it kind of balance. Ignore the input output. It's adding a little bit of a boost, but it's not really doing anything else.
Coronavirus. Masks. Social distancing.
Maybe a bit too warm for me, but that's what I've done there. I've just added that sort of warmth to it. Next thing I've gone for, and I'm sure a lot of us know this, is Ozone. And Ozone's great. I really like Ozone. I often use the Master Assistant. If you have Ozone, Master Assistant is great, but the way I like to use it is as soon as Master Assistant has given me what it thinks it should sound like, I delete everything but the dynamic EQ and the maximizer, and I will leave the dynamic EQ because it sort of figures out what frequency ranges are clipping and can sort of helps to attenuate those frequencies so you don't get any distortion in those areas, which is lovely. So I like to leave that because the AI is much more powerful than my ears in that scenario. But I'll often change the maximizer, and really I'll change it just to either hit harder or softer depending on how it's turned out. So in this case, I quite like how it's set. I think all I did was bring the threshold down.
Coronavirus. Masks. Social distancing. They ruin live gigs.
Make some noise. What? What'd you say?
So instead of going, we'll bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you hear a live track. V-collar
and so on. But what I want to point out there is notice it's not working super hard. It's just catching the odd moment. It's not processing the whole thing. It's not slamming it down. The next thing I like to do, and I'll talk about some alternative options in a couple of the other chains that we're looking at, but the next thing I've done is I've used something called Oxford Inflator, which is awesome. And this is effectively, it's sort of, it clips, it's soft clips. And if you don't know what soft clipping is, it's like a tasteful distortion. So it soft clips things and it adds to sort of extra loudness and I don't know, it compresses without compressing. It's magic. But it's a really lovely sound. And what this does is this is going to help me get the promo louder without feeling like I'm slamming the crap out of it, basically.
coronavirus, masks, social distancing. They ruin.
So you can already hear it's quite a lot louder. The red lights here are good. That shows that it's hitting 0 and going over. My rule of thumb with this is never to sort of have the signal going over +2 if I was to turn clipping over. So I'm just letting it clip some of those louder parts, and that's kind of helping me to deal with some of these extra transients that I might have. Then the last thing I've done is I've used L2 from Fabfilter. And this is the final kind of, I wouldn't say a brick wall, it's just making sure nothing squeaks past.
Coronavirus, masks.
So now we have a really nice, it's loud. I think it's clean and has some punch and weight to it. And that's kind of what we want to achieve. It feels like it might sit alongside one of the records that we've used in this particular promo. So let me play it for you one more time. I'll turn everything off, and then I'll turn everything on one by one as the promo goes on. And then I want to look at Master 2, which is sort of an alternative option.
Coronavirus, masks, social distancing. They ruin live gigs.
Make some noise. What? What'd you say?
So instead of going, we'll bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you hear a live track. Be caller 9 and you'll win $500 cash to help you through lockdown.
Oh, when I win, I can buy so many more masks.
Start Saturday morning at 6 on WIZZFX.
So I like how that sounds. That's my first choice. That's what I would probably do. There are some other little tips and techniques I might like to do with some mid-side EQ, perhaps right at the beginning, but I think that's a lot to take on there. If you're interested in mid-side EQ, after the session, reach out to me, and over the next couple of days, I'd be happy to kind of point you in some directions to talk, to help you learn about that or give you some tips and tricks. So that's that chain. That's something that I would probably print and use. And I often use a chain similar to that with my work. Here's an alternative option using some different plugins. Sounds kind of similar, but I'll walk you through it. Let me play it, and then I'll walk you through the decision process on this one. Oops, I should probably enable this one. Here we are.
Coronavirus, masks, social distancing. They ruin live gigs.
Make some noise. What? What'd you say?
So instead of going, we'll bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you hear a live track. Be caller 9 and you'll win $500 cash to help you through lockdown.
Oh, when I win, I can buy so many more masks.
Start Saturday morning at 6 on WIZZFX.
Cool. So again, I like this. It's not one I would probably use, but I like how it sounds. So what I've decided to do in this one is add the analog flavor right at the beginning. So this is sort of adding the mid-range sort of excitement, I suppose. for lack of a, that's probably the easiest way to describe it. I mean, I don't have any of the noise stuff on. I've just kind of tried to add a little bit of crunch to that mid-range with the drive. I tried these 3 different settings, Spike, Mic, and Nevo, and like the Nevo one. Then what I've done is I've run into this particular plugin from another Waves plugin. I mean, if you follow me again on socials, you know I don't often use Waves stuff, but these 2 plugins are really neat. And here what I've done, the chain that I've gone through is I've started with, sorry, very quickly to explain this more often if you've never seen it, it's sort of almost like a master chain, and you can drag and drop and move items around. It's quite a neat and versatile thing. So I've ignored the tape EQ right at the beginning. I've decided not to use that. And I've gone straight into this sort of filter section. And I've basically, I have used mid-side on this one. So the best way to describe mid-side is you EQ the mono signal differently from the stereo signal. And it just can help you with getting some extra clarity in the mono range and extra width in the sides if you want it. In this case, what I've done is the mono signal, I have cut the bass from 40 hertz down, and I've cut the tops from 15 hertz up. But in the sides, I've killed the top end at 20,000 hertz, and I've killed the bass at 110 hertz. So, I mean, it's a subtle thing, but it's just going to give me a little bit more room to compress later on. Next thing I've done is gone into the limiter, the mastering limiter here, and I've figured out by listening and watching my meters here that the bass is sort of sitting about 165, that's sort of all low end. So I've set the high pass so that it'll let the bass through the limiter and won't engage. And then I've set the limiter to just catch some of these bigger peaks that we're seeing in the waveform. Then what I've done is gone into this. I almost just bought this for the name. It's called the Magic Death Eye, and it's just a really neat compressor. It's like a mastering compressor. And here what I've done is I've not got it working too hard. If I just play back, coronavirus, that gain reduction meter's barely moving, but I've used it to mono out the bass, add a little bit of extra. This top part is a EQ, I'm sorry. So I'm just using it to kind of mono the bass signal below 100 hertz. I've added a little bit of bass. I've added some side only top EQ. It's a fairly, I've set the attack to slow, the release to fast. I'm letting anything below 200 hertz pass through the filter chain, through the compressor anyway. And it's just kind of helping to even out the sound. So, you know, the limiter, where before we didn't deal with some of these big peaks until we got to the Oxford Inflator, here we're trying to deal with some of these slightly bigger spikes earlier on. So we've done that with this plugin using the limiter. And then, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped that. I did a little EQ here, very subtle. I boosted up at 8K, little cuts and little boost in the low end. But that's irrelevant because really the most important thing that this is doing is just limiting some of these louder moments so that I can even it out with this compressor. So then what I've done is I've used Frontier. This is awesome and it's free. It's by D16 Group. And this is kind of your alternative to the Oxford Inflator, I suppose. It's not the same at all, but the fact that it has soft clipping and it's free is very useful. So what I've done here is I've used it as a traditional limiter. So you'll see this needle bounce backwards and forwards, but then I'm actually boosting the output volume. And what have I done? I've boosted it by a decibel. I've engaged soft clipping. So it's technically distorting, but because I've got soft clipping on, it's doing that nice fuzzy distortion that we talked about before, and it allows us to be louder. So just so you can see how that looks, just pick a section.
Going? We'll bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you hear a live track. Oh, yeah! B-Caller 9.
So again, not working a load, just catching a lot of those spikes and peaks because we've got quite a lot of different, we've got another limiter and another compressor in here. We've got quite a lot of processing going on. So I think you'll notice that I'm doing everything by small increments. Not a lot of things are going on. So I'm just trying to use each plugin for a specific reason rather than just every plugin is engaged to the max. The last thing in this one is this plugin again, and it's set up just like the first master chain we looked at, and it's just catching anything. It's the final kind of leveler, making sure nothing's getting too loud.
Coronavirus. Masks.
So you see again, I mean, it's working a little harder than before, but it's still not working loads. So let me play this one back, and I'll turn all the plugins on as we go.
Coronavirus. Masks. Social distancing. They ruin live gigs.
Make some noise. What? What'd you say?
So instead of going, we'll bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you hear a live track. Be caller 9 and you'll win $500 cash to help you through lockdown.
Oh, when I win, I could buy so many more masks.
Start Saturday morning at 6 on WIZZFX.
I quite like that one. It's nice. Not my favorite, but it works and it's nice. So what I'd like to do now is, no one's been posting any questions. I hope that's, I shouldn't read into that. But does anyone have any questions before we move on to anything more? Type away now, and I will do my best to answer. And in fact, do you know what I'll do? While you think, if you've got any questions, please do type them in. Just really quickly want to remind everyone of the promo that we wrote and that we made has used elements completely from Construct. So everything we're listening to is from the Construct database that is part of the WIZZFX product. So for instance, Dua Lipa is in the promo. So, loads of Dua Lipa stuff that we can pull from and that we did pull from in order to make the promo. And similarly with other artists in that promo. And we're updating it all the time. Not quite the same as a traditional production service because there's not pre-made stuff in here. If you want to have custom work made, it's served within this database. So it becomes more of a custom production service. The production service sounds like what you want rather than you end up sounding like the production service, if that makes sense. I would say, I've got a couple slides on this one. As I was saying, we make custom production and we deliver it in the system. If it's something you're really interested in, please have a chat with Ileana and Deborah. Both are on this call. You could message them, or there's the phone number to call if you're in the States. Alternatively, if you forget that number or those names, you can reach out to me on the socials, which I'll share at the end. I'll be happy to put you in touch. Cool. I see a question. At the appropriate point in the, oh, right. Okay, that's an interesting question. Please address how you process commercials for podcasts that will not be on air. Sure, I can absolutely address that with, I would do exactly the same thing. Because, as I sort of mentioned before, I like to process my work so that it can sit in any format. People consume radio in so many different ways, don't they, on their phones or whatever. So the way I'm processing this particular promo, or in your case, if it was a commercial for a podcast, I would still look at treating it the same way because I'm not specifically processing this stuff to just be on the radio. I'm processing it like it's a record, like it's a song. And as I was sort of mentioning at the top, people mix and master the songs to work in any environment or any environment within reason. They try their best to make it translate across multiple speaker sets, multiple stereotypes, mono, stereo, whatever. So that's sort of my goal when I'm mastering my promos is people could be listening in all sorts of different environments. So I don't try to just think about it as a specific to radio audio chain. I hope that helps. One thing you could do if you're worried about loudness, being too loud in a podcast, one of the things that I do on most of these chains is add a lot of loudness towards the end. So for instance, in the first two chains, you might just decide to avoid the limiting towards the end. So, so master 1, for instance, I might not use those 3 plugins. Master 2, I might just stop at Magic Defi. You know, you might decide that you don't need to slam them quite so much, and that's fine, because arguably podcasts are a little bit more dynamic by nature. So you don't need to necessarily go for big and loud. But, you know, as I say, the stuff that I've done for podcasts, I've processed exactly the same way. I might just not, as I say, limit quite so hard. So I hope that kind of helps. I'd be happy to kind of play around with a few options if you don't find something in the next 2 or 3 chains that we look at. So onwards, master chain 3. So this is just another option I wanted to do that's with free plugins, because we all love free. So let me make that one active, and I'll run through it, and then we can talk about free plugins and how I've approached this one.
Coronavirus. Masks. Social distancing. They ruin live gigs.
Make some noise. What? What'd you say?
So instead of going, we'll bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you hear a live track. Be caller 9 and you'll win $500 cash to help you through lockdown.
Oh, when I win, I can buy so many more masks.
Start Saturday morning at 6 on WIZZFX.
Cool. And I actually quite liked this one for free, only using free plugins. I quite liked how this turned out. This is probably my second favorite. So the first plugin I've used is this one from Fuse Audio Labs. It's called W2395C, and it's free, and it's just kind of like an analog, I don't know, it's almost like they've tried to copy some sort of console, like a Neve console or a, I don't know, gosh, I should know, but I can't remember off the top of my head what they've modeled it on. But I've just gone for the mix bus preset. I didn't even bother to tweak it. I just went, right, give me something that's mix bus. And what it seems to have done is just added something in the 5K range, done something interesting here. What's that, about 1K? A little bit of a notch up at 80K here. So, you know, it's obviously been modeled to sound like a mix bus of the gear that it's based on. So I've just gone with that, and I've lived with it. And that's just that warmth, that sort of mid-rangey kind of analog feel that I wanted to give the entire promo. Then what I've done is I've gone into this, another, again, they're all free, Coffee the Pun. So this is based off the Pultec EQs. So it's just kind of a really neat sort of low end and top end control. What's neat about the Pultec EQs, if you're a super nerd, is that you can cut and boost bass in the same area, and it does something kind of cool, creates this weird sort of hump that's quite attractive to the ears. So I've used that in this case, and I've cut it 150 ever so slightly, and then I've boosted, what's that, at 120 more than I've cut, and it's just creating this nice little definition in the low end that's quite nice. And then I boosted 20K by 2 dB, just the very, very tops, just so it's sort of like a little bit of extra weight, a little bit of extra sizzle. I've engaged the pre on this too, because I felt like I wanted even more analog flavor than I was getting from this one. Then the next thing I've done is, and I love this compressor, I actually use this on vocal chains all the time. This is basically a free version of this one, obviously with far less controls, but it's kind of based on a type of compression called Verimu. So the more signal that runs into it, the more compression it uses. So I've just set this up on auto mode. And actually now we've got some meters that we can see. I can play it back and you'll see how hard I've got it working.
Coronavirus. Masks.
So, you know, it's sort of not going above the 3 in the VU meter there. So that's kind of smoothing this thing out. And what's great about Verimu compression is it's really, really good for smoothing out levels. So that's why I've used it. Next thing I've done is this kind of weird little trick, and I can't remember who taught me this. I learned this off someone somewhere along the line. using the stock lo-fi plugin, if you just add 1 to the distortion, and I presume it's decibels, but I don't know, it actually gives quite a significant level boost. If you were doing a podcast, I would probably still use this because it's not aggressive, but it adds this like extra little bit of level, helps to kind of deal with some of those transients you might still have, and just keeps it, I don't know, just, yeah, there's something about it that I quite like. Like if I turn off these 2 limiters and then A and B this, I'll turn it on and off, you'll kind of hear the jump in level, and there seems to be a little extra warmth. It might not come through on the stream, but let's try it.
Coronavirus. Masks.
Yeah, I don't know. Anything more than 1 and you start to hear the distortion. So I quite like that. And then I've run into the trusty Frontier that we had before, set up fairly similarly, although I'm not boosting quite as much for the soft clipping this time, and it is limiting a little harder.
Coronavirus. Masks.
And that's cool, I like that. And then I've used, in this case, Maxim as my safety. And I guess Maxim here, and also when we were looking at Master Chain 2, when we used Frontier last, you would have noticed that the meters were clipping because Frontier kicks out a volume louder than is possible. So that's where I've just used, that's why I've got these safety limiters. It's just to like control that and stop the clipping, the digital clipping, which we don't want. So here I'm using Maxim for that. And now we have this really nice sound with purely free plugins. So let me play this back, turn all the plugins on.
Coronavirus. Masks. Social distancing. They ruin live gigs.
Make some noise. What? What'd you say?
So instead of going, we'll bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you hear a live track. Be caller 9 and you'll win $500 cash to help you through lockdown.
Oh, when I win, I could buy so many more masks.
Start Saturday morning at 6 on WIZZFX.
Cool. So, brief aside, as I was mentioning, for a podcast, you might just leave the Frontier and Maxim off, and then you've got still quite a dynamic and fairly loud mix, but it's not super loud, I guess, and super processed. So that's a free chain. The next one I want to look at is, what if we just do something really simple? Can we still make it sound kind of nice with something super simple, just using Waves Gold, because everybody has Waves Gold. Now, I'll just pull all of these open, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. But I've effectively just going left to right on these plugins. So, you know, we're taking out the bass here. What's that below? 39 hertz, we've just shelved, and everything above 18 in this case, we've shelved 18K. Then I'm running into a compressor that's set with a fairly light attack and release, fairly low ratio, and then it's hitting this limiter. And actually the limiter in this case is working quite hard because we're against my sort of rule of doing little bits and lots of different plugins with specific intentions. We're just using the limiter now to just bring the level up and catch all of the random extra loud bits. So it's sort of serving 3 or 4 different roles. So let me play back and you can see all of that in action.
Coronavirus. Masks. Social distancing. They ruin live gigs.
Make some noise. What? What'd you say?
So instead of going, we'll bring them to you. The WIZZFX Virtual Fest. All Saturday when you hear a live track. Be caller 9 and you'll win $500 cash to help you through lockdown.
Oh, when I win, I could buy so many more masks.
Start Saturday morning at 6 on WIZZFX.
Now, it's not that I don't like this chain. I think it's absolutely fine and very useful. But I think the danger with a chain like this is, at least for me, is I'd be very tempted to just keep pulling that threshold down and get it working more and more and more and more, and then you end up with something It just sounds horrendous. So I find that if you're relying too much on a plugin to do everything, you get a really kind of, overcooked sound. At least that's how I feel I work, and which is why that I quite often like to use 3 or 4 plugins in place of 1 or 2 to try and achieve the same thing, but with less of the sound of processing. The final chain I wanted to show you was almost like a please don't ever do this chain. And that is just slapping an L2 or a limiter on the mix. So this is kind of illustrating my point of, cool, I've done a good mix. Now I'm just going to ruin it with a limiter. So let's just have a listen to how this sounds.
Coronavirus. Masks. Social distancing. They ruin live.
I can't even listen to that anymore. And I hope it's come across on the stream on this one, but it just feels like all of the transients are gone, all of the impact points are missing. Everything just feels a bit squashed. The intelligibility of the voices feels like it's fighting against something. Everything's just getting cut off, and I don't like that. So that's kind of why I would never just employ a limiter in this sense. That's why I much prefer to kind of pick a path by either listening and looking at the waveform and making some decisions based on how I want to approach it to get the loudest and most dynamic and vibrant and exciting master that I can. So that's kind of my rationale. Again, we've whipped through a few more chains there. Does anyone have any questions before we kind of recap and round up the webinar? By all means, please type them into the chat window now, and I'll do my best to answer them. Very quickly, while that's happening, I'd just like to further explain a little bit more about, why there's no right or wrong. And I guess that is evident in that each, master 1, I approached one way, but then master 2 and 3, I approached a completely different way, where I added the analog feel first and then looked to deal with the sound. Whereas with master 1, I kind of looked to deal with some of the evening out of the promo and the levels and things, and then I added my warmth before I went for my loudness. So really that just sort of goes to illustrate that there's no right or wrong way to approach it, just that there are multiple routes through to find the sound you're looking for. And actually 1, 2, and 3, master 1, 2, and 3 are all masters that I like and would be happy to print. It's just that master 1 is my favorite. That's my usual sort of pathway. And that's the one that sounds most pleasing to my ears. And yes, I would master individual sound design elements. Dion, actually, do you know what I'll do? I might even have a session and I can show you how I master my, my sound design, because I do approach that differently. And I know that you are a mega nerd watching your socials, so you will love and understand some of this. So when I do my sound design, I definitely master it. I master it similar in a way, but slightly differently. I want it to be dynamic, right? So what you can see here is a bunch of sound design that I've made, and then the inactive track at the bottom that I've just made jumbo, that's the processed stuff, right? That's mastered. So not a massive difference, I guess. These are just breakers that we're looking at. But then you can see there's some extra weight in the sound just by looking at the waveform. And the way I've done this is I've used Choral 2, which is by Acoustica, and they do phenomenal stuff. And I've sort of got a setting I like for EQ that works across the board. I'll happily share this with anyone if they want it. And then I've added some, so that Choral is doing EQ, and then I've got a bit of compression going on, and I've used this elliptical filter to make sure that anything below 60 Hertz is in mono. Then I'm running into tape, which I use just about on every single thing that I ever make. And that's just adding that mid-range warmth that I like, that just sounds pleasing to my ears. And then I've got Ozone, which is actually doing quite a lot here. I'm using a multi-band thing. I'm doing a little bit of further monoization of the bass, a little bit of width towards the top. You know, this is all set up fairly normally. It's going to crash. There's too much going on in this session. But the limiter is just not working too hard, but hard enough. This bad boy that we talked about, and then that just to catch the level at the end. But it's still quite dynamic looking, which is what I want. I want it to be loud but dynamic. So yes, I tweak that from time to time depending on the sounds I'm running in it, but most of the time it's sort of a set and forget because I like how it sounds. And I kind of, as I build sound design, I have a method. So the method that I have for making my sound design just feeds into this chain nicely. Yeah, I hope that helps. Happy to share more or have a chat with you offline anytime, because I spend most of my time looking at what you're doing and wondering if I should be doing that. Anyone else for any questions? So, thank you. Yes, shouldn't I just consider doing it for a living? It's very kind. Thanks, guys. I hope everyone's got something useful out of this. I am available if you want to chat more, nerd out more questions you're afraid to ask in front of the group. Totally get it. Thank you very much if you've been here for all 4 sessions. Thanks for being a lifer. This was Bringing It to Life Mastering. As I say, hope you got something out of it. That's how you can get in touch with me. WIZZFX.com. Chris@WIZZFX.com is my email. Socials there. Reach out. Anything I can do to help. You know, love to help out. I'm all about paying it forward and sharing thoughts and tips and tricks. So by all means, reach out. Take care. I hope you're not in a lockdown like I am. If you are interested in WIZZFX Construct, again, reach out to Ileana or Deborah on the number I shared earlier, or you can hit me up on these details here and I'll point you in the right direction. Take care. All the best, and thank you.